Good morning, saints. Today is All Saints' Day, and we are saints according to the book of Ephesians. Now, people think Paul didn't write it, but I'm just going to say Paul wrote it because it's easier to talk about the author that way. In that passage, and in many other passages in Paul's writings, the people who follow Jesus, the disciples, are called saints. And it just means anybody who believes in Jesus and attempts to follow Jesus. That was how you were qualified to be a saint. Now, in our time, we would say, who, what? Me, a saint? You, a saint? Us, saints? Not me. Now, we frequently say something like, my grandmother was a saint. My grandmother, Serafina, was a saint, truly a saint. My dad, I would put him up for beatification any day. The most patient man, loving man, sacrificial man, prayerful man, one of the best Christians I've ever known. Amy's great-great-aunt, what was her first name? Eva Mary Matthews founded the Order of the Transfiguration, an order of nuns in Wisconsin, I believe, right? Okay, I get the Midwest mixed up, sorry. In Ohio. Sorry, Ohioans. In Ohio, and is in a book called Holy Women, Holy Men. So we're quick to say that people we love, or people out there, or the head of the altar guild, or whatever, is a saint, but not us. I wonder what that's about. Why would we not claim sainthood? Now, if you go back and look at the look at the passage of Ephesians, Jesus goes on to say, Paul goes on to say, with hopefully the inspiration of Jesus, that we have an inheritance. He uses the word twice, this inheritance of the saints and the inheritance of Christ. And it looks in the passage as if it's referring to our inheritance when we die and are risen with Christ in heaven. And it surely does refer to that. But it also refers to the other notion of inheritance, that those who remain have inherited the family business, the work of the relative who died. Jesus has died, and now it's our job to take on the family business. And what is the family business? Well, it's listed at the end of that passage we heard today, right? Do unto others as you would have them do to you. Bless those who curse you, turn the other cheek when you're hit, love your enemies, and so on. So why don't we embrace sainthood? What's the difference between the people we call saints and regular people that, like ourselves, who don't necessarily want to be listed as saints? Well, as I pondered this, why I wouldn't walk around and say, I am a saint, or even I am trying to be a saint, it's those Beatitudes that get me. So the Beatitudes of Luke are very different from the Beatitudes of Matthew. And so there are the blessings for those who are hungry and those who weep and those who are reviled, etc. And then there are the curses, those who are rich. I'm rich. Those who are full. I'm full. Those who laugh, I'm prone to laugh a lot, right? And those, people speak well of you all the time. Well, I wouldn't say that that's the case, but I wouldn't say that I'm constantly reviled either. So I look at that and go, well, how could I possibly even be called a saint when I hit all of those curses? And so it gives me pause. And I was thinking about that. It makes me hold back. Well, that is not what Jesus wants for us. Jesus doesn't want us to hold back, right? He wants us to step into the role, almost like putting on the costume of a Christian, but not just wearing the clothes and then acting like a Christian. Then maybe the more you act like a Christian, you actually start to embody Christ more and more in your life. The thing about saints, the ones who have been named as saints or canonized in the Catholic system and then appropriated by the rest of us, is that they were all kind of extreme, St. Francis was extreme. Peter was extreme. Teresa of Avila, rather extreme. Catherine of Siena, definitely extreme. And you're like, they're a little cuckoo, right? And you don't want to go that extreme as a Christian. This will be say, well, I don't want to go that crazy. Well, let me tell you a story about a moment from my junior high days. It was called a junior high then, but it did have a kind of a gifted level, 6th grade and then 7th and 8th grade. And by 8th grade, I was playing the clarinet in the band and the orchestra when we played together with the strings. And we played together with the strings. I was like second clarinet. I was, first chair, first clarinet. I was the second person on the first clarinets, always sitting next to Lynn, who always played better than I did. And then the violins were right here, so we're kind of clarinets, and here's the violins. And there was a boy named Paul, and Paul was in 6th grade. It was a 6th through 8th grade orchestra. Paul was short even for a 6th grader, so amongst 7th and 8th graders, he was short. He had short hair that was kind of dyed blonde from swimming in chlorinated pools. And he wore really big, it wasn't cool at the time to have big plastic framed glasses. He had big black framed glasses. They were so uncool. The rest of us had wire framed glasses. He was kind of a nerd. And Paul made mistakes all the time. So we'll go, dun, 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 and then he'd go, eep! I'm like, what are you doing, Paul? What are you doing? And this happened all the time. And so we would laugh. And even sometimes the conductor, he was a mercurial conductor is all I can say, he would get mad. And so he'd get mad at anybody who made the same mistake over and over again. Not one mistake, but if you just kept blatting when you weren't supposed to, or when you weren't supposed to play, he would get annoyed. And so we would laugh. And also Paul was just kind of nerdy. Like we would just be sitting here playing, you're playing, and Paul would be, really getting into it. And so laughed at him all the time. Then we went to the county music festival, and we played, and I don't know if we played Beethoven's Fifth or not, but let's just pretend we did. So there's Paul going, dun, 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 dun. And at the end of it, the judge comes up to sort of give you comments on how you're playing. And so we had played, okay. And Paul was sitting right there, and he goes, but I really want to talk about this player. And he walks up to Paul, and Paul's, of course, stunned, and we all kind of titter. Paul? And even the conductor, the teacher, kind of went, yeah. Well, and he said, who is this? And he said, well, that's Paul. And the judge said, he said something like, why are you laughing? And he didn't know why we were laughing. And so we stopped laughing, and then he said, what I want to say is you play with such passion, with such gusto, with such love for the music. You are feeling the Beethoven. He said, I want you all to play with that passion and that gusto. And it was a moment of wisdom and revelation for all the snotty 8th graders who got the notes right, but were laughing at the kid who was playing dun, 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 dun. He was extreme. Just a little extreme. Not Catherine of Siena extreme, not St. Denis walking around with his cut head in his hands, right? He was just going for it. And he made mistakes all the time because he went for it. That's how you get to be more and more of a Christian. You say, I'm going to make a mistake helping immigrants in that shelter today. I'm going to mistake in not donating enough, but I'll donate more next time. I'm going to make a mistake in how I approach that person about that subject. But you're going to keep trying. You're going to do it with gusto, because God doesn't call the perfect. The saints were not perfect. We'll hear more about that later today. We're not perfect. But if we say, well, I'm not a saint, and I'm not going to do anything extreme, and I'm not going to try harder because I think I'll just make mistakes. Well, that's just what evil wants you to do. No, make mistakes boldly and live with passion and gusto. Put on the cross of Christ and be a saint. Amen.